Abducted, Emma and Jean's terrifying encounter with alien horror. Jean had always been fascinated by the idea of aliens. As a child, he would spend hours staring up at the stars, dreaming of encountering extraterrestrial life. As he grew older, however, this fascination turned into something closer to obsession. He would spend every spare moment researching UFO sightings, attending conferences, and reading books about outer space. His girlfriend Emma tried to be supportive, but she could see that his interest was starting to consume him. One night, as Jean was scrolling through his favorite UFO forum, he saw an announcement that made his heart race. An amateur astronomer had reported seeing strange lights hovering over a nearby field. Jean couldn't resist the urge to investigate. Before he knew it, he was racing toward the site in his beat-up old pickup truck. When he arrived at the field, Jean was surprised to find that he wasn't the only one there. Several other cars were parked along the gravel road, and people were milling around with binoculars and cameras. Jean assumed they were all fellow UFO enthusiasts like himself, but as he approached them, he noticed something odd about their behavior. They were all silent. No one was speaking to each other, or even acknowledging each other's presence. It was as if they were all in a trance, staring fixedly at the sky. Jean felt a chill run down his spine. Something wasn't right here. But he couldn't resist the urge to look up himself, to see what they were all so entranced by. What he saw made his blood run cold. A huge spacecraft was hovering over the field, casting an eerie glow across the landscape. Jean couldn't believe his eyes. This was it, the encounter he had been dreaming of his entire life. He felt a thrill of excitement mixed with fear. But as he stared up at the ship, he realized that something wasn't right. There was no movement, no sign of life. It was as if the ship was abandoned. That's when he felt a hand on his shoulder. It was Emma. "Jean, we need to go," she said quietly, her eyes darting around nervously. Jean hesitated. This was the moment he had been waiting for, the chance to make contact with an alien race. But something in Emma's tone made him realize that he needed to leave. Reluctantly, he turned away from the ship and followed her back to the truck. As they drove away from the field, Jean couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled in the pit of his stomach. He looked over at Emma, hoping for some reassurance, but she was staring straight ahead, her face pale and drawn. "What's wrong?" he asked her. "I don't know," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But something's not right." They drove in silence for a few more minutes before Emma suddenly slammed on the brakes, making Jean lurch forward in his seat. "What the hell?" he yelled. "Look," she said, pointing out the window. Jean peered through the darkness and saw a figure standing by the side of the road. It was humanoid, but its limbs were elongated and its skin was a sickly shade of green. Its eyes glowed in the darkness, and Jean could feel its gaze boring into him. He felt a scream building in his throat, but before he could make a sound, the creature darted away, disappearing into the trees. Jean and Emma sat in stunned silence for a few moments before Emma finally spoke. "We need to get out of here," she said hoarsely. They drove back to their apartment in silence, both shaken by the night's events. But as they settled into bed, Jean couldn't help but feel a thrill of excitement. They had seen an alien. They had made contact. This was the beginning of a whole new chapter in human history. Or so he thought. Over the course of the next few days, strange things started happening to Jean and Emma. They would wake up in the middle of the night to find their apartment ransacked, with no sign of a break-in. They would hear strange noises outside their window, like claws scraping against the glass. And every time they went out in public, they felt like they were being watched, followed, even. Jean tried to convince himself that it was all in his head, that he was just being paranoid. But he couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously wrong. And as the days turned into weeks, and the weeks turned into months, the incidents only grew more frequent and more intense. Finally, Jean decided that they needed to take action. He dug out his old journals and started researching alien encounters, trying to figure out what they could do to protect themselves. But it was too late. The aliens had already infiltrated their lives, and there was nothing they could do to stop them. One night, as Jean and Emma were sitting in their living room watching TV, they heard a knock at the door. Jean got up to answer it, but before he could even reach the doorknob, it swung open on its own. Standing in the doorway was a creature unlike any they had ever seen. It was tall and slender, with skin as black as night and eyes that seemed to shine with their own inner light. Jean felt a surge of terror wash over him. This was no friendly alien. This was something else entirely. The creature stepped into the room, and Emma let out a piercing scream. Jean tried to grab her hand, to pull her away from danger, but it was too late. The creature was already on them, its long fingers wrapping around their arms and pulling them closer. Jean felt a searing pain as something sharp pierced his skin, injecting him with something cold and deadly. He struggled to break free, but it was like trying to move through molasses. His thoughts grew foggy, and he felt himself slipping away into darkness. The last thing he heard was Emma's scream, ringing out across the room like a bell tolling the end of the world. And then, there was nothing. Only silence, and the faint hum of an alien spacecraft hovering somewhere above the Earth.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like and tell us what you think in the comments. And of course, don't forget to subscribe.